So I'm going to hand you over to Bob Child from Historyonics. Bob, over to you.
Thank you. I've just been called I'm a cheeky sod, so that's a good start, isn't it?
Nothing new there then.
Yeah. Basically, we've heard a lot about ethics today, except the one thing that I don't think we've really heard about is what is a code of ethics. We can see lots of examples of it, and I shall point it at the wrong bloody button. There, these are the kind of things that we put in, but I always like to start off with William Morris, because he basically started off the code of ethics for conservation as it applies to buildings. And I think the last one is the best one. Since I've just married a picture restorer, she appreciates this thing of some smooth by the tricky hand of some unoriginal and thoughtless hack. And that really strikes home at her. And it really means that we're coming full circle, because William Morris's idea was of this protection, not restoration. And it was then, after that things started getting a little bit more sticky. So just a little bit of a review. We can say, again, this kind of stuff has been said today, is we know what we want to do. We know, in many cases, how we want to do it, but we're put off from doing it for one reason of resources, time, money, professional people to do the kind of actions, and therefore, in most circumstances, we may fail. And when we look at some of the more recent ethical sort of reviews, ECHO, done not that long ago, 10 years ago, says it takes responsibility for treatments. Restoration consists of direct action carried out on damaged or deteriorated cultural heritage. And I just bunged in those two pictures because I think it illustrates it rather nicely. The top one is the Gioconda in the Louvre, filthy, dirty, matted, typical French. It's items, probably filthy and dirty, discoloured varnish, because they're frightened of finding out that it's a fake, because it was stolen in the beginning of the 20th century, and on return, people thought that it might be faked. And now in the Prado, they found one obviously by the same school, if not by the same hand, and restored it, and we now have the comparison. So we now have the two completely different and at odds with each other ethics between the Louvre's standards and the Prado's standards of what they consider to be right and proper. And we can go even closer to the last 2 or 3 years. ICON, in a conservation group in 2008, says this, and I think the last sentence, most often such actions modify the appearance of an item, is perhaps the most telling. And again, I put these two pictures up. Pardon the colour balance of them, they're not very good. But the one is of Dr. Samuel Johnson, painted by Joshua Reynolds, and the bottom one is Dr. Samuel Johnson, painted by Joshua Reynolds. And in the top one, you can see, in the top right-hand corner, there are his dictionaries. Samuel was a lexicographer. And, I've got no green light, isn't that bait? I can go on as long as I like. Right, indeed. And when this picture was donated to the National Portrait Gallery about 25, 30 years ago, it was investigated by a picture restorer, a very respected picture restorer, Bettina Jessel, and on her investigation she found out that a lot of those bits and pieces were overpainting by a hand known or unknown, probably unknown. So after due and mature consideration by everybody concerned, the stakeholders as we would trenchantly call them, she took them off. And what you see now is the picture at the bottom there, without the dictionary, without other bits and pieces, and which is right, which is ethical, which is proper. I leave you to make the judgment. And we can say even things like the National Trust, English Heritage, other important museums have changed their values, perhaps over the last 20 years, and now we talk not about restoration, but of managing change, of accepting deterioration, of accepting things that will gradually change. And we might call this something nice like patination, and not do anything about it, but appreciate it in the fact that it's showing the processes of age and maturity. And we can look at things like these flags, the colours put up by military organisations, put up in the church when they get a new colour, which are allowed to deteriorate. And it says, and it's a philosophical and rather important way that they are allowed to deteriorate. And yet in the 70s, a lot of them were taken down, given to textile conservators who restored them. And we can make our judgment again on that. And then, of course, everything changed. When we had the new artists, and we had people like Damien Hirst, who says, the work will stay. You can get a new fish, new formaldehyde. It's back to that whole fucking thing of what's more important, the artist's original idea or the original work. And now we come to conceptual art. And conceptual art not only takes in art like this, but also things that are manufactured not by the originator, but by a separate company. So it can be a Jones's baler, it can become a clock, it can be a piece of conceptual art like this. And we perhaps have to think very differently from our standard traditional methodologies of managing change, restoring original, keeping the original as much as possible, using reversible processes. It's all a little bit more difficult. And I like this story because originally Damien Hirst put in a great white shark into a tank of formaldehyde. When that started to deteriorate, Saatchi complained, so Damien Hirst got another great white shark and bunged it in a tank of formaldehyde. When that started to deteriorate, he found that great white sharks are now protected under the CITES agreement and he couldn't use it. So now this one is a tiger shark. And if you go to his workshop in Stroud, you will find that there is a room nearly as big as this, which is a freezer room full of tiger sharks to replace this as it continues to rot. So this one is now the latest of the original 2001 one, and this is the fourth. And we can go on and look at other things. Mark Quinn, who is bizarre. I mean, he's bonkers, but he makes models of himself and he casts them in various things like ice or in rubber. And this one was sold, this was originally in the White Cube Gallery in the early 2002, 2003, put into store by the owner, James Moores, who used to be of Littlewoods fame. When he took it out of store to hang it up again, he found it had crumbled away completely. And as he says, I feel mightily pissed off about it. As well you would when you've spent several £100,000 on such a work of art. So what did he do? Well, no problemo. Because Mark Quinn says, OK, I archive my stuff. I know I still have the mould. I can just make you a new one. Good as new. Well, that might be so for a bit of latex rubber, but if you look at that face, that's made from his own blood. And I don't know how many times he's going to be prepared to donate his own blood, several quarts of the stuff, to remake the options that is being refabrication, as he now calls it. Not restoration, not replacement, refabrication. So we have the problem with there. And then we, of course, have got all these other problems with these kinds of artists where things are either designed to deteriorate or they become deteriorated in process. So Nam June Paik, his Motorola sets are now non-existent. Does he replace them? I ask you the question. And so we just get to the last couple of minutes of this, where we say what the new conservator must be thinking about is not perhaps a code of ethics, but where the code of ethics is based on, and that's the law. Because the law gives you the right of intellectual property, it gives you the right of copyright, it gives you the right of ownership, it gives you health and safety issues, and I just put a few of them up there. Health and safety, mentioned by Diane earlier on, COSH 2002, as amended, means that we have problems with using material like this bottom one, which is a label on something from the Welsh Folk Museum, which I stole earlier, where the number is in vermilion. It's mercury. It's a mercuric compound. The top one is formaldehyde. Formaldehyde is going to be banned next year as a preservative. What do we do then? Is it still original? How do we replace it? How do we deal with these kinds of issues? Oh, just very quickly, in my insurance, which I just refabricated only 2 or 3 days ago, it bans me from having cellulose nitrate in my workplace. HMG glue, cellulose nitrate film, cellulose nitrate objects. celluloid. Phew. Documentation, well, these are the other kinds of things that we need to think about and really start perhaps putting into our training courses, in that the importance of these things are now not just important, but vital. So contract law, authentication, valuation, health and safety, that's it. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Bob. Jonathan, we had you down for responding to this. Yes.
And I was prepared to respond to what you wrote in your abstract. But one thing I was very glad was that at every point you said, I leave that to you, as if all of these ethical things were a matter for discussion rather than something you could write down in an explicit way in a code of ethics or code of practice. So nearly all these things are a matter of discussion and then come eventually down to a matter of opinion. You ended up by saying law, it's all to do with law. The ECHO guidelines make that point very clearly early on, that actually that law supersedes any fancy ideas about ethics that you might have. So I don't know. But what I was going to say, had you talked about what you said you were going to talk about, was just to say that we have to, in the area of artworks, we have to assume that there is a difference between art and heritage, and things, a lot of things may be art. Not everything becomes art that is heritage. And there are mechanisms, either acquisition by a museum or getting on the World Heritage List, whatever, that says this is now heritage, and therefore your obligation to do something with that concept, that idea, that physical thing, changes at that point. At the level of Saatchi versus Hearst, whatever, they can do whatever they like with their stuff as well. You know, it's what Chris, I think, Knapp said this morning that about what Rob Payton had said about the Lord Mayor's coach. If it was the way around that the Lord Mayor could do what he liked for 50 weeks of the year, that's fine. It would be wrong if the museum was letting it out for 2 weeks of the year to have people make a mess of it. So it depends on the ownership. And as I say, there is a process, especially with a lot of this conceptual art, where there has to be a mechanism by which people say, this is now art that is heritage, rather than that this is just something that people call art.
Yes, I fully agree. It's the problem arises with conceptual art, of course, or modern art, is this thing of the lifetime of the artist plus 70 years after his death gives rights to the object, not to the owner. And that, can, I think, is likely to lead to difficulties in the future if you want to restore that object in any substantial way, or alter it in any substantial way, and you might be done.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, I don't think the situation has arisen. If I can give a very quick example, my wife. No longer a partner. No. Wife number 3. Was given a picture fairly recently by a living artist of a family. The wife brought it in. She said, I've just got divorced from my husband. It's very messy. Paint the bastard out. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, Bob, thank you very much. I'm going to move straight on to David. As we've used our time allocation, we're going to have a bit of time for discussion. So thank you. Cheers.